talk about English vowels, but I thought we'd do a little bit of review. It's very quick. So last time we talked about waves. We taught you how to get the period and then get the frequency out of the period. And then we also talk about human voice, human speech are in many cases, especially for vowels, are complex waves. And these complex waves can be decomposed using Fourier analysis, 傅立叶分析, to decompose to different, complex waves are formed by periodic pure waves. And we can decompose a complex wave so you can find out the simple waves. And then we call the lowest frequency our fundamental frequency. And then you call it 基频, and then you also know it as pitch, which is a perception to human ears. And then we learn about when your vocal folds are vibrating, there's actually a lot of overtones. It's not just your vocal fold don't vibrate like a pure wave that you can create in a physics lab. It actually have many companies, many friends coming along with it. It's a whole number of multiples of your fundamental frequency. So you might have this second one is twice of the frequency of your fundamental frequency, and the third one, the fourth one, and all those harmonics that's in harmony with your fundamental frequency are called overtones. They're over your fundamental frequency. We call them overtones. And then we talk about, I'm sorry this is cut off. We talk about, I didn't show you this graph last week, but when you're moving your tongues or changing the shape of your oral cavity, you're changing the shape of the tube inside your entire speech production organs. So it forms different tubes. That's why it's creating different size of the tube is like those hard glasses I show you that will resonate to different frequency. They pick the frequency they like. So you might have one hard glass picking up the frequency between 500 to 1000 and another picking different frequency to amplify it. Once you have the hard glasses to amplify it, remember what we talk about when we talk about resonant frequency, you can actually make that frequency much louder. That's how you can break the beaker in the video. 就是那个共振的频率有时候会比你输入的那个强度还要高，高到把烧杯震坏。These harmonics are actually the amplitude of it is actually declining, but because of the hard glasses in your mouth, it amplifies some of the frequencies they like and make them louder. And because of the different construction of your tongue, you're amplifying different frequency of different hertz. And that's how you get your first formant and second formant and third formant. Okay? So we won't get into much detail about the acoustic, but these are the things you need to know. And you also need to remember for each different vowels, they have different vowel composition. And your E might have its F1 and F2 fairly separated. But your A sound has the F1 and F2 fairly close to each other. That's how you get different vowels. And your ear need to be exposed to those vowels. After you were born, you're actually hearing these vowels from your parents and your family. And that's why after a while you get used to the composition of these vowels. So later on, when you hear these vowels, you can actually distinguish these vowels. And then just again, those earthworms we've been talking about, they're called formants. And it's a group of overtones that corresponding to a resonant frequency of the air in the vocal tract. And we call the lowest one F1, F2, and F3. Okay, so you might be a little bit confused because I have been telling you that we call the lowest one F0. 这里有一点会很奇怪的地方. And now I'm telling you, you call the lowest one F1. Don't you think it's a little bit weird? So F1, 2, and 3 are beyond the region of F0. So F1, 2, 3 is all the overtones that certain overtones will be favored by the tube inside your mouth. And they're creating the F1, 2, and 3. So F0 is determined here in your vocal fold. But all the F1, 2, and 3 are formed inside your mouth. Okay? So if I were to ask you to compare F0 and F1, which one do you think would always be the lowest? F0. The number cued you. Come on, number tells you it's F0. It's the source of this F1, 2, 3. 这样清楚了吗？基频是在这里产生的，你的 vocal fold 决定你的基频，而是你的基频的声音进到你的嘴巴之后，它会形成什么样的共振风，那个是由舌头决定的。所以我们的 F1, 2, and 3是在口腔这里头决定的。So today we're going to talk about English vowels. We're not just going to cover American English vowels. So do you guys realize the English you have been learning in Taiwan, which accent or which dialect do you think that variety of English is? So I think most of you guys learn American English accent. But so today we're going to talk about mostly focusing on American English and British English. And toward the end of the class, maybe we will be able to practice a little bit of the British accent. So that's the goal. So I'm teaching the accent today. So yesterday, I actually posted something on my Facebook asking my friends this question. But a friend of mine immediately posted this. Oh, the previous one, I'm sorry, it's in Chinese. The previous one was just me asking people's stories when they travel and how different accent of English might have tricked them one way or another. So he's like, depends on how you see it. And are you talking about what's standard? And then I actually don't like Taiwanese people or students tease non-English speaking countries the English accent of non-native speakers. Do you remember last week we mentioned a speaker of a certain language has difficulty distinguishing R and L? Japanese people. But what I always do is I always add a comment about we will make the same errors as a non-native speaker when we speak English. We don't prescribe what's right and wrong. We describe them. So naturally, there's no such thing for a linguist in terms of what's right and what's wrong, what's standard and what's not standard. But once again, let me remind you, and don't do that, because I do find some people like to tease other people's accent and treating them as inferior to, as if you are also a native speaker of English. Don't do that. Non-native speakers would naturally have problem with certain sounds. So it doesn't by any means that they're inferior to anyone, including yourself. Although we're talking about there are no standard form of certain, but you can find that when you're in America or when you're in Great Britain, commonly spread accent that people use, especially in newscasting. Yeah. So the standard of the Taiwan Mandarin in Taiwan is probably what the anchor people would use. They probably say we're going to talk about the quote-unquote standard or newscasting English form in America and in England. And so in America, the accent is actually, do you know a little bit about the accent in America? So for those people who are doing the broadcasting, do you think they're using the Southern accent, Boston accent, or California accent? The broadcasting in America is mostly from the Midwest region, 中西部的口音, which is compared to Boston, Tennessee, Texas, it's fairly plain. It doesn't have, well, I think it's plainer. For BBC English, it used the so what's the full name for RP? Yeah, received pronunciation. We talk about this in intro. Just look it up. And so there are actually different way. These two accents have different way of saying things. Like in your textbook, it talks about the word. And I want to show you a video that I just. Any of you heard of Catherine Tate? And the video is I think it's called Posh Mom Series. I'll try to show you 2 episodes and maybe 3. And this is a series depicting a family from a fairly high socioeconomic status. So there are snobbish comments that you can find. And later on you'll encounter a cheese named Brie. So how many cheese names do you know? Cheese. One name. 你知道有很多不同的 cheese. Give me some names. Cheddar, mozzarella. Cheddar is the one that you have in the hamburger in McDonald's, and then mozzarella. Gouda cheese is Dutch. Cheese names and pasta names are just confusing when I first arrived in America. So there will be a part of the video that talks about brie, but let's hear this. So I want you to pay attention to the vowels and some of their expressions. What is missing? What is in short? Yeah, extra virgin olive oil. So it's a special kind of olive oil, very expensive, not just regular olive oil. And the abbreviation for it in the States is usually EVOO. So you're like, I want some EVOO, and they know you want expensive olive oil. So how do you understand the accent? It looks like it's okay to you guys because you've been laughing. I don't know if it's because the place I stood, some of the words actually just blur together. I actually didn't get some of the words. But in the first half of this, so this is just a dialectal difference. When we talk about accent, it's mostly focusing on the different way people pronounce sounds. So it's focusing on sounds. But you can also say, oh, they're speaking different dialects. That's when you're mixing the sound and the word, the word, which word they pick to use, and in terms of semantics, how they use words differently. So just remind you again, when we talk about accent, it's mostly focusing on sounds. In the words they pronounce in the clip, so this is just a lexical difference. They tend to call people love, and in the States, in Midwest, sometimes we'll say honey. Oh, honey. It doesn't have, he or she doesn't have to be, usually he, doesn't have to be a real honey of yours, but you're just saying it as an endearment form. So, and the kids think the public station taxi is a public transportation. It's just teasing the people in that social status. How did the mom pronounce Jack? Jock. So many of the A sounds, not all of them. That's the painful part. Not all of the A sound are converted to the ah sound, the backward ah, jock. Don't know how to write this. So if you look at your vowel chart, so maybe not jock, how about got? Got. They use the same vowel as in jock. It's a further back. It's not a got. I got you. But it's further back as in I got. So later we will learn there are some words in British English that you actually simply convert the vowel to a different quality. So how would a person with British accent pronounce this? Yeah, it's path. Path. And then glass. So if you want to master British accent, you need to look into the dictionaries and see which are the words that has this sort of pronunciation and make sure you get that right. Then you can start your British accent practicing. How about here? How is their here different from your here? Today we're going to talk about how you get rid of some of the segment here and then add a little bit of something else and make your here, here, here. So when I say here, here, compared to here, the part is different, right? So we're going to talk about in British accent and in New England area in the States, they have a we call R dropping accent. You drop the R after a vowel, and then you get a he, and then you drop the R, but you want to compensate for that empty space. And so instead, they do they add a schwa to epenthesize the duration for that R sound. So you can do here, here. And then how about curse? Cuss, cuss. Yeah, just drop the vowel after your, drop the R after your vowel, and you do, that would be the first step of your British accent practicing. So Peter actually listed 3 very nice pronunciation dictionary, and they all use IPA, which you should be very familiar now. And there are many online dictionaries that you need to be careful about because some of them doesn't specify which accent the people are producing. So if you want to make sure you're getting the same accent, you can go through the pronunciation dictionary. But even as a phonetician, I would actually encourage you to, not encourage you, it's not the most important, accent isn't the end of the world. I have met so many international students who have very strong accent, but we still manage to communicate with each other and become very good friends. So I know that many of you are so obsessed about getting the accent right. But I just want to remind you there are other things that you can focus on. And accent, as long as you can convey your meaning, accent I believe accent is okay for communication. But in order to be able to tell the differences of this pronunciation and actually record them and maybe eventually change your way of pronouncing things, you need to be able to transcribe the sound that you heard. So you might be able to hear the difference between here and here. But will you be able to write it down so in the future you can remind yourself that's the difference between these two? So transcription is a way, is a method that you systematically represent sounds in written forms. It's not translation, it's transcribing what you heard. And so far, it's very easy. Oops, sorry. It's very easy for you to do an orthographic transcription. So when I say take, you can simply write down take, right? But we all know that T-A-K-E doesn't precisely transcribe, doesn't precisely represent the sounds in take, because there are only 3 segments in take. You have the T, you have the K, and you have an A sound, which is slightly longer than the A. That's why I'm transcribing as in take. And then later on today, we're going to learn that in some British accent, they actually don't say take, they say take instead. And instead of saying buy, I want to buy things, they might say bay or ba, I ba. This is very southern. Can you feel that? Ba. When one time I went camping in Maine, the state of Maine. And there's a place, it's called, I saw a t-shirt and it has this written on it. It's Ba. This means that you elongate the vowel. Turns out it's Bar Harbor. So New England, Maine is in the New England area, which also have the R dropping accent. So that's why they transcribe it as Ba. So in phonetics, we are learning how to transcribe things phonetically. We want to be able to get all the sounds written down using IPA. So like what I was saying, the R coloring. So there are different forms of English. And in some form of English, like in British accent, you have the non. So if it's a R-colored language, we call it a roticized form. Roticized just means it's on page 92. So in the second line, it talks about the vowel as in bird. Remember when you're younger, your teacher will probably ask you to transcribe the sound as in bird using that, bird. So this is saying that the vowel can be said to be R-colored. It involves an additional feature. Additional meaning we don't really put this in the vowel chart because it doesn't fit the features we introduced. It doesn't fit the front, back, or high and low. It has an extra feature, which is curling your tongue. This additional feature is roticization. If you go down to the second to the last paragraph, rhotic accents. Are you there? Rhotic accents are the norm in most part of North America. So when you have a rhotic accent, it means that your R is there. You have here or bird. They were prevalent throughout Britain in Shakespeare's time and still occur in the West Country, Scotland, and other regions distant from London. So this is saying that in London, they are having this non-rhotic accent. But you can still hear rhotic accents in Scotland and West Countries and other regions, but not London. So in London, you have this you have this received pronunciation accent that you just drop the R. Shortly after, it became fashionable in the southeast of England to drop post-vocalic Rs. So post-vocalic just means that after the vowel or that you drop the R, the habit spread to areas of the United States in New England and part of the South. These regions are now non-rhotic to various degrees. Now the next paragraph, standard BBC English is not rhotic and has diphthongs going from a vowel near the outside of the vowel space toward the central vowel schwa. In words such as here and there, these are transcribed as here, here, and there, there. Can you do that? Here, there. Yeah, okay. Some speakers have long instead of particularly before R as very and bearing. Okay, I'll leave that to you guys. Okay, today we're going to learn more about the vowels. We'll talk about the diphthongs and stress, and then we will do an experiment. We're talking about diphthongs. The diphthongs are really interesting when you mimic different accents. So we're on page 90. Find the paragraph second to the last. The whole thing is just saying that the glide in I sometimes will change into different vowels. So there are different variants you can do. You can do not. You can do I. So if you want to do the British, the London accent, you do this. And if you want to do the Scottish accent, you can do this as in sight. Sight, a. So can you do the contrast between these two? This it should be the as in bit, as in shit, I. But this one, you're emphasizing this is a real e, I. Yeah. So, like I said, these differences could be a little bit subtle, but if you want to get the accent right, this is what you do. Now, moving on to the diphthong ow. The diphthongs you're mostly familiar with. And then I love the changes that people do ow around the world. So, how do you pronounce O-W-L? Ow. Now, feel your articulators. You start with the ah, and then you do oo, and then you do the dark L. Ow, ow. Ow, ow. Actually, I feel that my oo is kind of merged with my dark L. Ow, ow, ow. Okay, now just try the ow part. How about? As in how. Okay. Usually we say how. Now, how do you do it with the accent that's described here? Usually, yeah, in London accent, you can replace the ah with the a, and it becomes. This is really fun to pronounce. Ew. Ew. Hew. Hew is fun. Hew, new, new. Can you do a u for how? Hew, hew, hew. Okay, we're getting that. Now I stay in Canada for a while. The way they do ow is ew. So how do you say about? Actually, they do a slightly different stress. About. And did you notice that when I say sorry, sometimes I switch to the Canadian accent. I say sorry. Sorry. So there is an R after my so. So when you say sorry, as in English, sorry, compared to sorry, so there are segmental differences, and there are segmental differences. So I feel that I am adding an extra R after the sorry, and then stress is shifting to the re part. Sorry. So that's the ow part. About. It's about time. Now, diphthong a as in hey. Oh, this is the fun one too. So when the textbook is talking about a bigger difference, it means these two segments has greater differences in terms of quality. Now, if I were to ask you, if I pronounce a diphthong, it's pronounced as diphthong, not diphthong. Diphthong, if I do a, compared to I, which one do you think have a greater difference between these two segments? Yeah, you see, the ah, now you can, this is the time you use the knowledge of your vocal chart, because I is right here and then E is here. If you're shifting for such a long distance, it's a greater quality change compared to a, that kind of thing. So that's the A part. And O, I'll leave the O and U to you because it's not as distinct. So this is just a quick summary of some of the things we talk about. Do a British accent, you can drop your post-vocalic R and replace it with schwa. And you substitute ah with ah, further back ah. So when the British person is speaking, some people like to think that they're holding an egg inside their mouth when they say path, or got, and I can't. So, but just notice that sometimes it could be, it's not a systematic change. It's not like changing all the a to ah. Some words has different pronunciation, and you just have to look it up from your pronunciation dictionary. And then there's another thing you can do. You can strengthen the and the ing suffix. Thinking, If you compare thinking and thinking, so we emphasize that almost as if it has a longer duration, that ingma has a, this is called ingma, has a longer duration. And then remember last time we talked about they don't have the flap rule. So in American English you may say butter, butter, butter. But in British accent you say, yeah, change that T to a truly aspirated T, and then drop the R, replace it with a schwa, and it become butter, butter. And then how do you pronounce this? With H, or with her, or without? Without. But in British English, this initial H needs to be pronounced. So it's herb, herb. Oh yeah, drop that R. It's after a vowel. It's after a vowel. Okay. And then, of course, there are other lexical differences, like trouser, first floor, that kind of lexical differences that you know about British accent. When I ask people what kind of accent they have problem with, the typical answer is Scottish English. The Scottish variety, so it does have that R. Remember we were talking about it's only in London they're dropping the R, but in other areas in England they still have the R rhotic version of English. Now the next one is a London accent. You can actually find more examples in your CDs that came along with the textbook. Next time when you're comparing accent of two different dialects or two different variants, there are three things. It's listed in your textbook too. There are three things you can use to compare between them. First of all is what the book called system. You want to know if they have the same number of vowels. Because in some American dialects, they are merging the ah as in cat and the aw as in caught. Caught and caught. Now, I asked you this last time already. So in your pronunciation, do you pronounce these two things the same way or different way? And this? Why do I feel the same? You're pronouncing it in the same way. I do caught, caught, and caught, caught. But there are some dialects, some American English accent will actually merge these two, so they have one less vowels. They're merging these two to become somewhere in between the ah and the aw, most likely just the ah sound. They don't have this. So if you're comparing two accents, you can first find out if they have the same number of vowels. Maybe they simply are missing one vowel and merging all the sounds, all the words of this sound toward this sound. Okay, that's actually a fairly easier conversion for us. You just systematically change all this to this. But sometimes there are distributional differences, like what I was saying. In some British English, some of the a sound in American English are pronounced as the ah sound, but some of them still have the a pronunciation. That's the thing you need the dictionary for. You just have to find out how this. Maybe they have the same number of vowels. They also have vowel 1 and vowel 2, but they just distribute in different words, and those are the things you need to look up. That's the distribution. And sometimes there are vowel quality differences. And like what we were saying, some of the, like the British ah, the quality is very different from the typical ah you're familiar with. So there are qualitative differences that you need to pay attention to. So if you can master these three criteria, you will have a better idea of how two accents might be different from each other. So there are systems in terms of maybe they have two different systems. And distribution, you just have to find out which word is pronouncing which vowel. And then you need to find out how vowel qualities are different. And the way you find out whether their vowel qualities are the same or different is by using prod. You record, you can analyze. Actually, all those recordings are in your CDs. You can actually pull it out, and you can look at the London R is maybe different from your from your American English R. Okay? So the reason why you have that vowel chart assignment is to push you to study the vowel quality of those vowels. We'll talk about that. And this next section is just a quick walkthrough of the rules. It's on your page 898. There are 6 rules listed in this textbook. Some are very straightforward, so I'm just going to read it to you. The first rule is other things being equal. A given vowel is the longest in an open syllable. Now, do you guys remember what's an open syllable? 什么叫 open syllable? Which one is an open syllable? 2? Open syllable means the vowel does not have any coda blocking it from, it doesn't have any coda. Do you guys remember coda? For syllable construction, this is the onset of your syllable. And this is the coda. This is from your intro linguistics. This is the coda. And this is your nucleus. Okay? So an open syllable is a syllable without coda. So it's ship. Ship. Is that an open syllable? No, because it ends with a coda. What's the coda of that syllable? P, right? How about B? Is that an open syllable? Yeah, it has B and E, P, nothing after it. Open syllable. So this is just saying in general, the vowel is the longest when it's in an open syllable. And you should go, duh. There's nothing behind it. You can just say the vowel without any interruption. But the next longest, oh, okay. How about you try this? If you pronounce which vowel is longer, it's the same vowel, but it's followed by a different consonant. If you compare bit and bit, which it do you think is slightly longer than the other? We're not native speakers of the language, but in general, the next longest, so if a syllable is closed and end with a voiced consonant, it's longer than a syllable closed by a voiceless consonant. So this one is longer, and you should be able to feel it. So this is so if it's in a CV, it's the longest. It's followed by a voiced consonant, and this you can just say it without memorizing it. You can be able to feel it. Okay. Now the second rule is also a duh. Other things being equal, vowels are longer in stressed syllable. And we will have another session about stress in the next following this. So when you stress a syllable, naturally you make everything in that syllable longer. So all things being equal, vowels are longer when it's in a stressed syllable. And number three could be a little bit new to you. The idea of number 3 is if you compare a vowel in CV, or so this is word 1, so this is word 1, 2, and 3. Which vowel do you think have the longest duration? Compare B and bebop and bebop. One should be pretty long, right? I mean, it's an open syllable. And these are just telling you, the rule is just telling you that you can imagine that when you're saying words in English, you try to make all the words having a relatively the same duration. And so when you have more syllables, naturally everybody have a smaller share of the duration. 就是你的字越长，其实你的vowel duration 就会比较短. So these are kind of very straightforward. Okay. Number 4, a reduced vowel may be voiceless when after a voiceless stop and before a voiceless stop. The parenthesized phrase could be omit. Oh, okay. So try say the word tomato. Tomato. When you transcribe it, it could be tomato, right? But actually, you can go home and record yourself when you say the word tomato really fast. You can that vowel after T is barely there. Tomato, tomato. You don't really say the part because it's not stressed. You go tomato, tomato. And that schwa is what we call, it's almost devoiced. It's difficult to imagine a vowel being voiceless. Remember how we talk about vowel? You need to vibrate your vocal fold, change the shape of your oral cavity. But that schwa after the t is really, could be voiceless. Tomato, tomato. Do you feel that is like, it goes with the aspiration of the t. You do tomato, tomato. And it's the same thing for Japanese as well. Try say, what's the name of that TV? Toshiba. Okay, when you say Toshiba, the best way is probably saying very, with all the articulations being there, don't use the cell phone. Hey. So if you want to pronounce all the segment, you do Toshiba. But in most cases, you do Toshiba. Toshiba. It happens too. And you can think of it as a contamination. When the vowel is before or after a voiceless segment, you want to be voiceless as well. That's the bad influence of your neighbor. 就是那个 vowel 如果前面或后面接了 voiceless 的声音，你就有可能会 devoice 那个 vowel, especially when the vowel is not stressed. Okay, number 5 you're all very familiar with. Vowels are nasalized in syllable closed by nasal consonant. So can, lie your father. Remember last time? Lying your father or lie your father. Our last section of our lecture today is what I'm most familiar with. My PhD dissertation was about stress. Now, if you look at this sentence, does it make sense to you? An English is weaker than in the middle than a Dutch. Okay, OCTOPUS, this is the same word that occur in English and in Dutch, but they say it slightly differently. How do you say it in English? How many vowels in the word? 3个. Okay. Where is the stress? Oct. And then so exactly if you were to pronounce the central vowel, which vowel is it? T, just the vowel, octopus. But in Dutch, do you want to guess how they pronounce it? Dutch and German are supposed to have a better alphabet to sound correspondence. So when you see A, you say ah. When you see O, you say, okay, so it would be, now compare your octopus to octopus. Do you feel an English octopus is weaker in the middle? Okay, 你可以感觉到吗？一个是 O, octo, O, and T. So this is a phenomenon that we will cover in this session. We'll talk about stress. So when in English, in American English, I'm most familiar with the American English accent. If a vowel or a syllable is not stressed, if it's not stressed, you are more likely to reduce that vowel to a schwa. And but sometimes it's not just turning into a schwa. it could be anything that's more centralized. You could be saying a oo sound, but when it's not stressed, you just move it slightly toward the schwa sound. Maybe not exactly schwa, but you're centralizing it. So it's okay. Here's the question: to pronounce a schwa compared to the pronunciation of a u sound or a oo sound, which one do you think is easier for your articulators? Yeah, for schwa, you pretty much just open your mouth and do But if you want to do yu, the lip rounding is a lot of effort. So my grandma always called me Yiwen. Yeah, a person with Taiwanese accent. In Taiwanese, there's no yu sound. So it's very likely they just use. If you compare yu and yi, can you feel that in the vowel chart, it's actually centralizing? Yeah, it's easier. All those lip rounding vowels are much more difficult. So here are 3 columns. This is from your textbook. Do you feel one is weaker than another? Confirm feels stronger, and then confirmation. The stress is actually in the may part. So that syllable is actually not stressed. So reduced vowel is usually associated with unstressed syllable. But that's one thing. I was talking to one of your fellow students the other day, and he was saying, "Oh, I promise." How do you say the word? Yeah, most of you say it with the reduced schwa. But in British accent and in some of the people's pronunciation, they tend to pronounce the alphabet. Promise. Promise. Yeah. So it's just one thing that you need to pay attention to, because I think from my understanding to you guys, if I were to tell you to stress a syllable, you have absolutely no problem stressing the syllable. But the difficulty of yours is it actually lies in reducing the syllable that should be reduced if you want to really make your accent like Native American English like. Okay? But for me, it's okay. You can do whatever you want. But if you're aiming to be an actor or to be able to do some accent, you need to pay attention to those reduced ones. Make sure you reduce the one that the speaker of your target language is reducing. So this is just a summary. So when we talk about stress, you can think of them as sentential stress. I bought a cat, not a dog. I bought a cat, not that I stole a cat. I bought a cat. I bought a cat. Not you. I bought it. Not my mother. I bought a cat. So you can actually stress different words in a sentence to make the meaning different. That's sentential stress. But you guys are more familiar with the lexical stress. Object and object. It's at the word level. You just have different stress for different words. And when you talk about stress in terms of how they sound differently, the stressed one usually, do you want to guess? The stressed one usually have higher or lower fundamental frequency. The stressed syllable, do they usually have higher or lower fundamental frequency? Higher. You make your stressed syllable a little bit higher, and then intensity. You make it stronger or weaker when you want to stress a syllable? Stronger. Yeah, higher intensity, higher fundamental frequency, and in terms of duration, you make it longer. That's how you stress a syllable. And also, the last thing that you should know is sometimes you also change the vowel quality. Remember the E sound, when reduced, turned into a schwa? That's a vowel quality difference. And that's something that you guys usually miss. You are very good at using these 3 correlates. But vowel quality is the thing that you tend to neglect. And sometimes it creates a foreign accent. And when it's not reduced, we call it a full vowel. And when it's reduced, we say it's a reduced vowel, or we say it's centralized to the center of your vowel chart. Okay? So this is the stress. The last thing we want to do today is we're actually doing an experiment here. And this is how it works. I'm gonna play you one syllable. It's either it's very close to ba or very close to pa, and your job is to circle which one you think it is. And there are gonna be some cases that sounds like it's in between, but just make up your mind and decide, oh, this is more like ba or more like pa. Okay, this is a practice. Okay, practice. Don't mark anything. Ba. 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 This is more pa-like, eh? In between. Are they all the same? I'll try the volume just once. Is this volume okay? Okay. Okay, now this time we're not going to do any exercise. We'll just go ahead and going to start it. So that's the tempo we're going to have. I imagine you hear ba and then you circle. You circle the first case and decide whether it's a ba or pa. Man task. Are you ready? Get your pen ready. Good. Now, go. Ba. 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 Okay, it's over. Now, it's the time. There are 3 things you do on this piece of paper. First of all, under each token, so you see the number 2 here? Just write what your answer was for number 2. I'm going to guess that's a ba. Is it? Oh, yay, I'm good. Number 8, I'm guessing it's ba as well. Okay, just do that for the first paragraph, for the first table. Just write down your answers for the numbers. Okay? So you had, how many questions did we have? Yeah, we had 35 tokens, right? We have 35 stimuli. And then just write down what your answer was for that number. You can take your time. So once you're done, you can start moving on to the second table. This is you calculate out of 5 times. What's the percentage of your answer that is ba? Okay, so if you calculate the first column, I'm guessing 5 out of 5 times you have a ba sound. Is it? If that's the case, it's 100% ba. Okay, but if you have 4 out of 5 times, like Venny, that has a ba sound, that would be, what's the percentage? 80, right? 就是你算5次里面有几次ba. And then when you're done, you can start putting dots. So the first column is 0 millisecond VOT. And then you can see how, in terms of percentage, what was your percentage for the first column, second column, third, fourth, 5, 6, 7. Yeah, you mark the percentage to the corresponding column. If you remember our lecture about VOT, if a consonant have a 0 millisecond VOT, do you think you're most likely to perceive it as a ba or pa? 0 millisecond. If there is no VOT, there's no that puff of air, you're probably most likely perceiving it as a ba. So a graph, like, do you think is your graph like this? But think about it. We are doing a gradient, so we resynthesized. 我们合成了 we resynthesize these sounds to make them 10 millisecond, 20, 30, 40, and 50. And the idea of it is if our human ear, now this is another thing, if our human ear is that objective, 如果我们是非常非常客观的, the line should be a gradient decrease in terms of the VOT, right? But I'm telling you, we are not objective when it comes to categorize sounds. We're categorizing whether they are ba or pa, right? So if you're in a lab wearing a headphone in a very quiet environment, your graph should look like this. So it looks like, doesn't matter that token has a 10 millisecond VOT or 20 millisecond VOT. If it's 100%, you're perceiving it as a ba, right? So let me state again. It looks like it doesn't matter whether the VOT has slight differences from the 0% millisecond. You categorize it as a ba, and you're being a little bit forgiven about the VOT differences. It's okay, you're still a ba. And then for these guys, some of them are much typical pa with a longer VOT. Remember, if you have a long leg, you perceive it as an aspirated pa, right? So, but it looks like you are willing to tolerate the differences between 40, 50, and 60. You perceive them as pa. And this is what in psycholinguistics we talk about this phenomenon as categorical perception. I'll give you an example before I get back to the definition. So, okay, I'm from Tainan County, Baihe, and if I were to tell you I'm going to bring you to my farm, which I keep two kinds of chickens, I guess with two kinds, I can say there are two kinds of them. And this is before you go. So imagine this is you. And you're not looking at my farm just yet, but I'm telling you, I have two kinds of chicken in my farm. And so after I told you that, you turn around and look at the farm. Now, if you compare the graph here and the graph here, what's different? This is like in the newspaper. I'm asking you to 找茬 to see how are the graphs different in the left, on the left and on the right-hand side. 你觉得这两个图有什么不一样? So which side has more variety? 哪一边看起来比较多? 右边吗? You see this guy has big eyes, right? But after here, they all look the same. So it looks like in this graph, how many kinds of chickens are there? Two kinds. But this, is there only two? They all look slightly different. This one has bigger eyes, that's curly hair, and that's a choppy. And so this is what happened because I told you. Okay, this is a subjective part of your perception. I told you there are two kinds. So when you go and look at the chicken, you want to categorize them. in two kinds. Okay? So you're neglecting differences of these chickens. 明白我意思吗？因为我跟你说有2种，所以你的脑子就觉得只有2种。所以那个大眼睛的跟小眼睛的人就觉得反正他们都是 curly hair, they're one kind. 然后其他的是另外一种。Okay? So this is why we call it categorical perception. And speech sounds works the same way because in Mandarin or even in English, there are only 2 ba-pa kind of sounds. So your perceptual system wants to categorize in 2 ways, and you're willing to sacrifice the differences. So speech sounds are identified as one way or another, no halfway. There's nothing halfway. That's why you don't get that gradient shift. You want it to be ba or pa. You don't have a gradient perception. So speech stimuli may be physically continuous. Like the VOT we had, it could be 0, 10, 20, 30. It could be continuous physically. But perception is categorical. You want to categorize as B or P. And you're less sensitive to sounds in the same category. So what I'm saying is, if I play a sound that has 40 millisecond VOT and another sound that's 50 millisecond VOT, and I ask you, do you think they're the same? They're same type of sounds or different? Let's compare this. If I ask you, if I play 2 sounds, one has a 40 millisecond, another has 60. Okay, that's one pair. And I play you another sound that's also has 20 millisecond differences. That's 20 and 40. Do you think you're better at telling the difference between the first pair or the second pair? Yeah, because that second pair is cross 2 boundaries, cross a boundary of these 2 categories. So this is your Ba kingdom, the Ba Guo, and this is your Pa kingdom. When you're hearing sounds in the Ba kingdom, you don't care if there are 20 millisecond difference. You don't care about that difference. But if they're crossing the boundary, just at the boundary of your Ba and Pa kingdom, you immediately can tell the difference. They're different. That one is from the Ba kingdom, and that one is from the Pa kingdom. Okay? So let me just play that slide one more time. Listeners are less sensitive to sounds in the same category. Okay, if I can play you a 40 millisecond and 50 millisecond, 60 millisecond VOT sound, your subjective categorical perception will categorize both of them as Pa. Okay, because they're in the same category when we speak. So what do you think? What did I tell you about the Spanish Ba and Pas? You guys remember the Spanish Ba and Pa? What's their contrast? Our contrast is voices unaspirated and aspirated, right? And their contrast is voiced and unaspirated, right? So can you imagine what their graph should be like? Now, mind I ask you again, a truly voiced stop. Their voice one set time value is usually positive or negative. A truly voiced, 一个真正的 voiced stop, 它的 voicing 很快就开始了. So the VOT is negative. So can you imagine where the boundary? Okay, if I were to ask you, our boundary for Mandarin stops. Our boundary is right here. Our B is here. Our P is here. The boundary is somewhere around 30 millisecond VOT. And do you want to guess what a Spanish speaker or Arabic speaker's categorical perception will be? Where do they cut the pie? I actually did it on my Spanish friend. But you guys have so many other language exposure. You're familiar with English ba and pa and Mandarin ba and pa. My Spanish friend's VOT, the graph is like this. So do you see where they cut the pi? 0. So for them, it doesn't matter you're doing a ba or a pa. It's all p to them. So our ba and pa, Mandarin ba and pa, for them are, so their categories. 我们刚刚不是说他们的 category 有2个吗？ A truly voiced, and then a P unaspirated. So, like I said, a truly voiced stop would have negative VOT. So, if you have negative 40, it's a ba for them. But after a while, when they reach 0 millisecond, they're like, hey, wait a minute. That doesn't sound like a real ba anymore. That's a ba to me. Remember, I don't really pronounce the aspirated ba. It's always pasta. Tortilla. Instead of saying tortilla, it's tortilla. Tortilla. The T, they don't do the aspiration. They do the unaspirated part. So they cut the pi here. And that becomes a problem when a Spanish or an Arabic speaker try to learn a language that cuts the pi here. Now, I'll ask you one last question and I'll let you go. Imagine there are 2 babies, one born in Argentina, in the Spanish-speaking environment, and the other one born here in the Mandarin-speaking environment. When they were first born, let's say, usually we can do experiment on them as early as 45 minutes after they're born, but let's say 3 days after they're born. And we can do experiment on how they found. So the way to decide whether they're interested in certain sounds, whether they think they're different, is by detecting their sucking rate. So if you play pa, 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 and then you do pa, 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 and then you do a really long pa, they're probably not, and then you trace their sucking rate. You can know if they think, oh, that's a new sound, interesting. If they suck faster, that's interesting. So that's how we make sure we know if they think a certain sound is different. You just play one sound for like 1 minute, and you play another sound. If their speaking rate increase, most likely they think it's interesting. 这种叫 habitual paradigm， 就是你先让他熟悉一个声音，然后放另外一个。如果他们那个奶嘴吸的速度加快的话，就表示他们对那个声音觉得不一样。Okay, now this is what happened. If you play a token from here and then here, they probably won't feel it's different. And but my question to you is, after 3 days after you're born, do you think children of these 2 different environments sense these sounds differently? Now we're talking about a ba sound and a pa sound and a pa aspirated. It's difficult to ask this question, so I'm just going to tell you. So according to our experiment, when you were first born, you are actually sensitive to this category and this category when you're first born. But then after like 7-8 months of exposure to your ambient language, you start to shift your boundary. So if you're in Argentina, this boundary disappears. But if you're born in Taiwan, this boundary disappears. It's interesting because as human beings, we're able to know how our perception is regulated or affected by our environment. We are the same species. A baby in Argentina and Taiwan, it's also, we are all Homo sapiens. It's the same species. 我们是同一个，就是 we had similar perception system, but because of your environment, of the ambient language, you're losing sensitivity of one category, keeping what category that's useful to you. And that's interesting. And it becomes challenging when you're trying to reverse this, sort of. When you're a Spanish-speaking person and trying to learn another language that has this boundary, that's causing the problem. And why? So what part of the job of linguist is to figure out what happened here, and then work with people from second language learning department and try to create programs that can help you recreate this category in terms of how to train you in terms of production and perception. So that's all what I want to talk about.